were the Dark Ages. Now, what were the Dark Ages? All of us have heard of the Dark Ages, but I don't think many of us really know what they were. It was over 500 years of no knowledge. How did that happen? Let me give you the example. In our day and age, this is the example that will help you understand what the Dark Ages were. Imagine, where do we go for information these days? The internet, right? We go to the Googles. And the Googles enlighten us, right? So these days we have the internet, right? So these days we go to the internet. Imagine if some kind of government regulation, because there used to be things called empires. Imagine that there's an empire on Earth today, and they said, we're going to regulate the information and the knowledge because we want to make sure that nothing's getting out that we don't want to get out. Look what's happening in Iran right now, right? They do that. They prohibit internet and knowledge. So imagine that the world empire said, we're going to have one server. And that one server, we'll put it in New York City. And that one server is going to broadcast the internet all over the world. Whenever you log in, it's coming from New York. There's one server. Imagine if New York burned. Yeah. What would happen to the world's information if there's only one server because the government was paranoid and they only want the information to come from one spot? So imagine if New York City burned down and the server was destroyed. Yeah. There was no other server. All the information, everything in the cloud, lost. That's the Dark Ages. Yeah. Because there was an empire, Rome. Yeah. The fall of Rome. Rome burned for 6 days. 4 out of its 14 districts were totally destroyed. All written knowledge was lost. All roads led to Rome because they had the national and the world libraries. All the libraries full of the books and the learning, extremely expensive because they had to copy it by hand. A book was very expensive. Rome burned down. All knowledge, except for scattered, very small, scattered, tiny little libraries with junk books, only those survived. Knowledge was literally lost for over 500 years. Where are we going with this? The dinosaurs, for the most part, went extinct. And whenever all knowledge and history and recorded history of dinosaurs was lost in the fall of Rome, all of a sudden people forgot that there were ever dinosaurs. Do you know what the knowledge of dinosaurs became? Legends that were called dragons. Is it strange to anyone in here that every single civilization on Earth has dragon legends? Is that strange to anybody? Every single civilization on Earth, every single one of them, has legends about dragons. Why? Because there used to be these things called dinosaurs. They didn't survive, most of them, past the flood very well. But there used to be these big animals. There used to be, and then of course it becomes legend and they grow wings and they, the dragons we have of legend. This is how it happened, you guys. And then all of a sudden imagine, after over 500 years later, and now you have dragon legends and medieval folklore and killing the dragon and King Arthur and all this kind of thing. Imagine that is birthed. And then all of a sudden, a century later, or a millennia later, someone's digging in the dirt. Clunk. Oh, what is that? It's a giant lizard. Imagine 1,000 years later, all of a sudden they discover a dinosaur bone. They lost all knowledge of these things because they went extinct for the most part not long after the flood. Could some still be surviving? I think so. I'm going to give you some facts on that. I'm going to give you some reasons I believe that. All of a sudden it became a phenomenon. There were dinosaurs. When? Must have been a long time ago because we don't see them anymore today. Must have been, dun, 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 billions of years ago. And then evolution loved that because it became their hallmark. Well, the dinosaurs. When do you think the dinosaurs walked the earth? We'll talk about that. This is what they found. Dinosaur bones. They started popping up all over the place. Dinosaurs. In 1809, the first dinosaur bone was discovered. 1809. 1809. That's about 800 years after the Dark Ages. About 800 years after the Dark Ages, the first dinosaur bone was found. In 1841, Sir Richard Owen, he coined the name dinosaur, which I know if you look anywhere it says terrible lizard. But remember that the word terrible has changed meanings over the years. In the King James Bible, God is called terrible, but it means striking terror or awesome. That's what it means. So whenever we hear that a dinosaur means a terrible lizard, in today's English, it'd be better to translate it awesome lizard, or lizard that strikes terror in people. It'd be better translated like that. So terrible or awesome lizard is what it means. In 1892, guess what? Was that long ago, 1892?
Yeah.
That was really not that long ago. Dinosaur finally appeared in the dictionary. 1892. I'm going to show you an 1891 dictionary in just a minute. Before 1841, guess what dinosaurs were called? Dragons. The legends of dragons came from the existence of dinosaurs, but then they went extinct, or so we think, for the most part anyway. Here, you can find just about anything online these days. Here's a dictionary from 1891, the year before dinosaur made it into the dictionary. Look at this. Where should it be? Probably right around here. LMNO. Yeah, so dinosaur should be right here, but it's not. Because they didn't know what that was yet. Nobody had invented the word. What were they calling these creatures before that? Dragons. That's what they called them. Now, this is what the legend became, right? Isn't that what a dragon is supposed to look like? Whenever someone thinks of dragons, that's what they think of because that's what the legend became. Now, the word dragon, tanim, is used 34 times in the Bible. I gave you a couple examples there. 34 times the Bible talks about dragons. By the way, don't some dragons still survive? Don't we have the Komodo dragon? Aren't lizards simply miniature dinosaurs? Aren't they?
Yes.
We have all kinds of creatures that look just like dinosaurs, identical bones, but they're just small. They don't get big anymore. We have a different environment now. That's why I think most of them died out after the change in environment and atmosphere after the flood of Noah.
What's this group we have right now is a rhino.
We have a rhinoceros, we have alligators, we have the Komodo dragon. Every civilization has dragon legends, and this is what it turned into. That's how it was, and this is what it became. They probably took a T-Rex or something similar, and after thousands of years of folklore, it turns into that. But the original, there he is, and is in all his glory. And we're about to learn about, in the Bible, this big guy. This is who the Bible makes mention of many times. Really? We're going to study that right now. The behemoth. The behemoth of Job. Could it be any other animal? I think after we read what the Bible says, I don't think we're going to think it could be any other animal except this big guy right here. So, seeing what we just saw, 4,000 years ago, Hyrcanpolis, King Narmer, the first Egyptian pharaoh, this was one of his shields. This is dated at 4,000 years ago. What are these animals? What are those?
Wow.
Everything else on here is like a real human, even a human dressed up, different animals. I see like an elephant. What are these things? What are those? Well, who knows? From the same find, what are these crazy animals that seem to be blowing fire or have a forked tongue, one, I don't know which, but has a crazy looking head, a long neck? What on earth could that be? Everything else seems to be a normal animal. Here they are again. Everything else seems to be a normal animal. And so they're going to put strange animals mixed in with real animals? Why would they do that? Here it is again. Whatever that thing was, it was widely known in those days. Here's a cylinder from the 4th millennium before Christ, The Story of Man, Volume 1. That's where you can find this. It's now located in the Louvre in Paris. What are these things? What are these crazy animals? And they seem to interlock their necks. Maybe that's, snakes do that in breeding, don't they? What are these things and why do we know about that? Whenever they unearthed Babylon, they found Babylon because Saddam Hussein wanted to rebuild Babylon in 1982. In 1982, whenever Saddam Hussein, who would sign his letters as the nephew of Nebuchadnezzar to the Jews whenever he would threaten them, that's recent history. He would sign his threatening letters to Israel as the nephew of Nebuchadnezzar. Whenever he unearthed Babylon, because he wanted to rebuild Babylon, what did they find all over the walls of Babylon? There were two animals, a lion and whatever that is. Whatever that is. How did Nebuchadnezzar, this was the wall that Nebuchadnezzar built in Babylon, how could Nebuchadnezzar know about there it is, the forked tongue again. It looks like it has scales and a crazy long neck. What is that? We don't know. But obviously, Nebuchadnezzar knew. Now, Marco Polo, is he a trustworthy guy, or is he like a crazy National Enquirer kind of guy? Marco Polo is very respected, isn't he? He was an explorer. He was a historian. In 1271 AD, which is not that long ago, less than 1,000 years ago, Marco Polo lived in China for 17 years. He reported that the emperor was raising dragons to pull his royal chariots. Was Marco Polo nuts? Didn't he know that they'd been extinct for like billions of years? Why did Marco Polo report that the emperor was raising dragons to pull his royal chariots? Because he saw them. Because he saw them. And now, he wasn't too afraid of ridicule either, was he? Would we report something like that? Or we might even keep that hush-hush because they're going to ridicule us. Marco Polo was not afraid to report it. Why? Because just like Mr. Skinner said, he saw it. An Incan tomb from 1150 after Christ. This looks like a little Incan warrior. Where's Sebastian? Sebastian's an Incan warrior. He's from Peru. Yeah. So this is one of Sebastian's relatives. Sebastian, that was one tough dude. Your dad came from this guy, I'll tell you what. Sebastian's got a really tough dad. What is this animal that he's wrestling with? Is he, obviously, this almost looks like a strategy. Wear a horn helmet, they'll attack the horn for whatever reason, stab him in the neck. It almost looks like a strategy, doesn't it? Now, I don't know if it is, but also look at these crazy markings. We'll talk about that in just a second. Strange things. The circular patterns. This is from 1,000 years ago. You guys, this was found from a civilization 1,000 years ago. Is this not a perfectly drawn Tyrannosaurus Rex? Yes. I showed you when we discovered dinosaur bones. Not long ago, 150 years ago. We discovered the first dinosaur bone 150 years ago. How did 1,000 years ago, the Incans, how did they know about Tyrannosaurus? And look at this. Is that your Triceratops?
Yeah.
It's a perfectly drawn Triceratops. And again, they have the strange texture on their back and the same circular patterns. How did they know about this? 1,000 years ago? Sorry, hey Sebastian, your people must not have known that these things have been extinct for billions of years. They're sitting here drawing pictures of them. Very good pictures too. This guy might be riding one. What is this? This is 1,000 years old. This is 900 years old. What in the world is this? Does that not look like a perfectly drawn dragon or a perfectly drawn dinosaur?
Yes.
How would these people have known about this? Unless they lived among them. This is the state that my wife is from. My wife is Mexican, and she comes from a state right in the middle of Mexico. It's called Guanajuato. That's the state. The city is Acámbaro. They're in Mexico. This is like 800 years old. This is 800 years old. What on earth are these things that they knitted into this, whatever it is? If you were to ask me, I'd say, that looks like a dinosaur. Could the Mexicans have known about dinosaurs just like the Peruvians did? Maybe Veronica has some warriors in her family too. You never know. This is the Congo in the middle of Africa. Who here wants to take a plane trip tomorrow to Syria?
No.
If I buy your plane ticket, would y'all take a trip to the capital of Syria? I'll give you a Bible to carry around with you.
No.
There are places that most humans don't want to go, right? The Congo is one of them. Do you realize that this is one of the most unexplored places on earth? If you just study the Congo. You don't need to take my word for it. You don't need to take my word for anything. I'm just like Fox. I'm John Fox. This is Fox News. I report, you decide, right?
That was good.
The Congo is known. It's actually known as one of the most unexplored parts on the earth. It's one of the most unexplored parts on earth. Why? Because just like Syria today, it's a dangerous, dangerous place. There are like over 17 factions, and they're always in civil war. Always. Always. Now before that, maybe people went to Congo, but ever since we started wanting to learn about dinosaurs, that's only like 150 years old. But that's only about 150 years of history whenever we wanted to learn about dinosaurs. So before that, maybe people went to Congo, but maybe not. But the thing is, they've never reported anything because they've never wanted to go to the Congo because it's a dangerous place. And the mosquitoes and the animals are vicious. It's a jungle. It's a swamp jungle is what it is. So if you don't like mosquitoes and bugs and large animals that eat you, and if the animals don't get you, the warring factions will. That's the United States in size compared to the Congo.
Wow.
Do your own research. That's how big, it's like what, a third of the size of the United States? Almost half the size? It's a huge place, and it's a swamp. The whole place is a jungle swamp. Very dangerous. That's what it looks like. That's a picture from the Congo. From 1945 to the present day, civil war has reigned. There are 70 factions. 70 warring factions trying to take control of the Congo. Now, Eugene Thomas, I'm giving you this information so you can study this yourself. Again, we're in Acts 17:11 church. Acts 17:11 says that the Bereans were nobler than those of Thessalonica because they heard everything preached and accepted it with a willing heart, but then they searched the scripture to make sure it was so. So I'm teaching you this stuff. Feel free to investigate it. As a matter of fact, that'll build your own faith. Feel free to investigate. Eugene Thomas was a missionary since 1955. There he is. Could y'all tell which one he was? So that's Eugene Thomas. Since 1955, he went over to the Congo because he said, no one's ever been. Let's go. Let's take medical supplies. Let's take books. Let's take the English language. Let's take Christianity. So they said, all right, sounds good. They showed up with a bunch of books. They had a dinosaur book. They're just going through books randomly, and whenever the kids opened up the book, Makili Mabimbi, Makili Mabimbi, Makili Mabimbi, and they said, what does that mean? And they said, well, that's what that animal's called. And they said, no, they're mistaken. That animal's been extinct for billions of years. And they said, we're sorry to hear about that, but he lives in our swamp. They said Makili Mabimbi. Or however you pronounce that. I'm doing my best here. I don't know how you pronounce that.
It was pretty. Keep it up.
This was their drawing. This is their drawing. Here's what they say about them. They said they've killed one before. They ate its meat for weeks, and it made many of them sick. They said it has a nasty disposition. It lives under the trees, in the swamp. It usually stays in the river or the waterways. That it does not like anyone intruding anywhere near its space. Well, look at a hippopotamus today. What kills more people in the world than any other animal? The hippopotamus. Because if you go in the lake where a hippopotamus is, guess who's going to get eaten? You. Those things open up their mouth like that and they chum. Well, these things do not like human interaction. They don't like any kind of interaction. They're extremely aggressive. That's the way they describe it. That's how they described it. I made the picture PG for y'all. I was a little worried about that. I said, no, let's just make that PG. How about that? So Makili Mbembe, this is another one of their drawings. And if you remember back in 1985, they made a movie about this. Who here remembers the commercials about Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend, back in 1985? They made a movie about this until they began being ridiculed by the science community, and then it was squashed. And who's ever heard of this movie since 1985? No one. Mm-hmm. Everything in PG, because I'm not the only person that knows about this. Most creationists know about this very, very well. This is a movie that just came out. The creationists finally had enough. Creationists like me, we finally had enough. I recommend this movie. I own a copy of this movie. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, you can watch it for free. It's called Is Genesis History? If you have Netflix, I recommend you watch this as soon as you can. This is so well done, with nothing but facts. They take you on expeditions. Do you know how often they find fresh dinosaur tissue these days? In places like Arizona, in places like Alaska, in places like Colorado, all over the earth. Do you know how often, every time they find a dinosaur these days, guess what they're also finding? Fresh tissue. You'd think that after billions of years it would have rotted, right? Evolution will very soon become a joke because it's a lie. Very soon, this 150-year-old religion called evolution will die. Let me give you just an excerpt from Institute for Creation Research, written by this guy named Brian Thomas. It's called Dinosaur Soft Tissue is Here to Stay. Every time they find dinosaurs these days, they're finding fresh tissue. In recent decades, soft, squishy tissues have been discovered inside fossilized dinosaur bones. They seem so fresh that it appears as though the bodies were buried only a few thousand years ago. Maybe 4,400 years ago in a flood. These finds, these discoveries, also present a dilemma. How could these soft tissues have been preserved for 10,000, let alone 65 million or more years? Either the vast evolutionary ages are dramatically erroneous, or we don't understand decay. Isn't decay something that we can watch and measure and learn about? That's very simple. Leave an apple out for an hour, what happens to it? It starts decaying. It starts oxidizing because it's organic. We understand decay. What the problem is, evolutionary ages are dramatically erroneous. The millions of years age assignments must go. But if the deep time means billions of years, a lot of time. But if the deep time goes, guess what? Then so does the grand story of evolution that depends on it. What's the only reason that evolutionists teach billions of years? Because they've never seen anything evolve in 6,000. You have to have billions of years to have evolution. It's the only reason they hang on to it. You have to have long ago, far away in order to have evolution. For many, that is too sacred an assumption to dare alter. It's their religion, it's their sacred cow. Biblical data, however, not only provide the time frame for the death of these dinosaurs in flood deposits a few thousand years ago, but also a mode of deposition, an agreement with observable data that their demise occurred when they fell into a watery grave. How do things become fossils? They're buried in mud. It's the only way. A million buffalo were killed whenever we came to the United States. Whenever our ancestors came to the United States, we killed 1 million buffalo on the killing fields. Do you know how many turned into fossils? None. You have to simply believe that all that happened because it was recorded, because there's no evidence of it. Why didn't any of them become fossils? Because they weren't buried in mud. They were killed. Our ancestors took what they needed for food and pelт, and then birds and critters ate the rest. They prefer the word critters these days. Yet, we find all these bones fossilized in the ground. How do you get a fossil to even form? It must be buried in mud. What could bury so many organisms in mud and encapsulate them and cause them to fossilize? I don't know, maybe a worldwide flood? What do you think? Everything we see on this earth is best described by a year-long flood that covered the earth. Everything. Everything. I would highly recommend that movie. I've been teaching this for a long time. And whenever I saw that movie come out in like mid-2017, I said, finally. Finally. Sometimes I feel like I stand alone. And then I'm like, finally. Here we are, Job chapter 40. Behold now, God is speaking. Remember, this is God is speaking. Behold now, behemoth. That's what he calls him. Now, why does God say behold? That's King James. Why does God say behold? What does behold mean? It means look. Is he telling Job to look? Would God be describing something to Job that there's no way Job can see? That'd be like me saying, behold, a space Martian. I can't show you a space Martian. God is saying, look at behemoth. Behold now, behemoth. Is it possible that Job could see behemoth? Yeah. Behold now, behemoth, who I made along with you. What does that mean, who I made along with you? We were all made on the sixth day. We were all made on the sixth day. Believing in billions of years might just have you call God a liar. Am I stretching here too much, or am I telling the truth? Believing in billions of years might just force you to call God a liar. He eats grass like an ox. So we know he's not an ox because he eats grass like an ox. It doesn't say he eats grass because he's an ox. It says he eats grass like an ox. Look, his strength is in his core. I'd say so. Roger, would that constitute his core? Not a good one. It's big though, isn't it? His strength is in his core, and his power is in his abdomen. I'd say so. That's a big abdomen. He moves his tail like a cedar tree. Now, most Bible commentators, because they're terrified of evolution, my heart breaks. My heart breaks. They say, must be an elephant. Does an elephant have a tail like a cedar tree? No. An elephant has, look at my shoelace. That's what an elephant's tail looks like. He moves his tail like a cedar tree. The tendons of his thighs are woven firmly together. His bones are as strong as brass, and his bones are like bars of iron. Would this constitute bars of iron? Yeah. Can we think of any other animal on earth that would really fit that description? Nope. And there's more. And there's more. He is the largest and most powerful of God's animals. Wow. Only Behemoth's creator can destroy him. Wow. Now, a 22 can kill an alligator. A spear can kill an alligator. A lion can kill an alligator. Do it every day in Africa. The alligator is a delicacy to the lion. They love eating some reptile. The mountains where the wild animals play provide him with food. Now look where it says he lives, and remember Makili Mabembe. Remember Makili Mabembe, and check out where the Bible says that he likes to roam and hang out. He lies under the shade trees in the covert of the reeds in the swamp. That's the same thing the Africans in the Congo told us. It's the same thing. The overhanging shade trees offer him shade, while the willows along the bank surround him. He hangs out in the waterways. He's not restricted to it. He can also go up and feed on the mountain too. But where does he like to hang out? In the swamp. That's where he likes to hang out. Behold, even when the river rages, Behemoth is not afraid. His confidence does not falter, even if the Jordan were to surge up to his mouth. No one can take him by force. What does no one mean? No one. No man anyway, no human being. No one can take him by force. Can we take alligators by force? Old Steve Irwin did it every day, didn't he? Crikey, remember him? No one can take him by force. His nose cannot be pierced by snares. This is some kind of crazy animal we're talking about here. You'd almost think he was talking about a dinosaur.
So why do you think God didn't tell Noah maybe to collect some of these smaller ones?
He did.
You think so? But then
Well, they survived the flood. They survived the flood. But here's the thing. Noah did not have to collect any animals. What does the Bible say? God sent the animals to them, and they marched 2 by 2 into the ark. Noah sat there watching the parade go by. Noah's job, read Genesis very carefully, he didn't collect any animals at all. He stood there watching the parade. His job was to collect food for them. His job was to build the ark and to collect food. And by the way, to take dinosaurs, you just need 2 of their kind. The Bible always talks about kinds, not species. We're talking interfertility. So 2 of their kinds came, and God is so smart that he's not going to bring 2 giant ones. He can bring 2 babies. As long as you have a pink one and a blue one, you're okay. Right? God is not stupid. God is the smartest person in the existence. He's going to bring 2 baby dinosaurs on there. They'll grow over the year in the ark, and then they come off and they repopulate. As simple as that. Look at the size of this thing. These are from the bones that we find. 40 feet tall. And I don't think he's even really standing up straight, do you? I think he might be taller than 40 feet. That's a little tiny human being in a bull African elephant. Looks like a pipsqueak next to it. Looks like a nice sitting chair for that dinosaur. A tail like a